welcome to Park Date. I will make this intro quick because I have to get on a train. You can hear in the background, yes, it's the noise of a train. I can see a clock counting down. So I have to be quick, and yet I'm still rambling. Anyway, in this episode, Dec Munro is the person that you're going to hear from. Dec is amazing. Dec is Mr. Comedy. He is the person who knows everything that happens in comedy, creates a lot that happens in comedy. He's directed shows for the likes of Lara, Ricote, Stuart, Goldsmith, and many more. He also does, I was going to say he does a podcast. He does a comedy course, and in fact, I say that Dec is the man who taught me to be funny. And if I'm not funny, then it's Dec's fault. So Dec is a great person. You're going to hear from him. And one of the things that he does, he's a member of the collective that run the Bill Murray, one of London's best comedy venues. He started up this incredible little comedy venue. It's a pub where all the best people do their comedy sets. And he very kindly gave Park Date a backstage tour of the Bill Murray. So do enjoy this episode, and as ever, if you enjoy, please like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Thank you. Okay, I'm here at the Bill Murray, part of Angel Comedy Club, with Dec Munro. Hi Dec, how are you?
Hi Chris, I'm good, thanks very much. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. We've just been chatting, and maybe that introduction sounds a bit too professional. So I think we have a good rapport, and now it's like we're on the radio, like, oh, hello. But Dec, thank you for joining us today. And we're in the venue. You're one of the people who run the Bill Murray, and I thought it would be nice to start this podcast with something a bit different. We're going to walk to a park in a minute, but I thought, Dec, that you might like to take our listeners on an audio tour. I was almost putting my Halloween voice on, an audio tour of the Bill Murray. So we're here in this place, and maybe you want to tell us a bit about how the Bill Murray started and what kind of inspired you to open the venue with your fellow comedy fans.
Sure. Okay. We opened in 2016, and the sort of end of 2016, Barry Ferns, who's the founder of Angel Comedy along with Sarah Pierce, ran a venue round the corner above a pub in Islington. The Bill Murray is a comedy club in Islington in London, and they came to me effectively and said, "We've got this idea. Would you like to join us and shit away what little money you have?" And I was like, "Yeah,
take all my money."
All of our money, to be fair. And so I opened in 2016, and we called it the Bill Murray. I thought it was funny to maybe name it after somebody quite famous. You know, pubs are always named the blah blah blah, but we were worried a little bit about the legal issues around naming it after somebody, and so what we thought would be funny was to find a historical individual who had the name of a established comedian, and so we found a titled member of the nobility called William Murray, who was the whipping boy for, I think, Charles II, and so legally this venue, this pub, is named after
I didn't know any of this.
William Murray.
Is that true?
That's true. That's entirely true. And we thought quite cynically that it would be. We got it wrong, but we thought it would be funny if Bill Murray then sued us, and the idea was that we would then go through the rest of the Ghostbusters, and it would be like, okay, it's going to be the Dan Aykroyd next week, and then it's going to be the blah, or we just go through the SNL cast when he was part of SNL, or whatever it might be. And so we still have, somewhere in the venue, and hopefully we'll find it today, a break glass in case of Bill Murray thing, which is a letter that we wrote to Bill Murray saying, "Dear Bill Murray, you're not legally our Bill Murray. Would you like to be our Bill Murray? please, come to the venue. Bill Murray has, subsequent to 2016, been to London at least twice. I've been to see him in the South Bank Centre doing sort of kind of jazz music, and he was amazing. He apparently has heard of the venue. And was told by somebody that it's named after him, and he was like, "Oh, that's ridiculous," and hasn't bothered to come, hasn't got in contact with us, absolutely hasn't sued us.
Yeah,
no interest.
He needs to come because I'm not sure if he's still dating Khalees, the singer, but he was at one point, and he was in London a lot.
Yes.
So yeah, he should come down and Bill, come and see your place.
Yeah, so if you're listening, then, yeah. So that's pretty much the history of it.
So 2016.
It's a collective. There are sort of 4 of us that founded it. One of those people, Rachel, left and has been replaced by James. So it's James, Barry, Sarah, and I. And we've now got brilliant people who work here alongside us, and it's become, I think, quite an established part of the comedy community. So we have shows, 3 times a night or 4 times over the weekend, and the idea is that you can do your first gig here, so we run comedy courses, but you can also do the work in progress show, which is a kind of practice show before you perform at the O2. So you could do your first gig ever, and then the night before you do your biggest gig ever, 20 years later, you could come back to the Bill Murray. And so it's a room, and we're standing here now in the kind of performance.
Yeah, we're in the performance room. Yeah, with the stage in front of us.
Yes. And this seats about 90 people. Where we're standing, you feel like it could only seat about 12, right?
Yeah.
But it does, I promise you, seat about 90, 95 people. Yeah. And the advantage of, we have chairs that are kind of stacked to the side, so we can put out as many chairs as we need, is the room feels full with 20 people or so. But if you do get a full room of kind of 90, then it feels incredibly energetic, and it's a really nice room to play. So I think comedians quite like that.
Yeah, you've had everyone in here. Nish Kumar, James A. Costa, Chris Beanland.
Chris Beanland. In fact, so the venue was crowdfunded. So we took out, we managed to take over the lease, but we couldn't pay for the renovations. Yeah. So I'll show you Nish Kumar's plaque.
Yes, let's have a look. Right, so
it says Nish Kumar sponsored this thing.
Exactly.
And the whole thing.
There's all these plaques along the wall, which is a really nice touch. Yeah.
And that comes from a venue in Philadelphia called Good Comedy. And if you're listening, some people have come to the Bill Murray and been like, this is an amazing idea of crowdfunding it. And we are the first, I think, crowdfunded stand-up comedy venue. Yeah. But Good Comedy, which is primarily an improv comedy thing, did this.
Yeah.
And they were run by a really talented team, and I thought, that's an idea.
It's a good thing.
We could. Yeah.
It's a good thing, isn't it?
So we're walking past this dumb waiter, which again was sponsored.
Yeah. Who are you calling dumb? You're a dumb waiter.
Sure. And then there are, if you look at it, the chairs are sponsored. And the walls and the taps on the bar. So there's hopefully a sense of community when you come in, and also, and rightly, a sense of ownership. So at least for the first couple of years, people would come in and point out the bit of the wall that
more plaques on the wall. Yeah, exactly. This is nice to see, isn't it? So yeah, people who love comedy. It's a really loyal crowd that come down here as well, isn't it? People really love the venue. All these names on the stone above the fireplace. And
they're really kindly loyal, but they're also really supportive. And it means that for an audience, for a comedian, I think they feel like they can take risks. And the venue itself is just off of Upper Street and Essex Road in Islington, but you have to kind of find your way here. It's unlikely you'd walk in off the street, and I think the fact that it's intentional that people are here also means the crowd is a bit more like, we primarily come for comedy, we want to be supportive, we want to be friendly, there's a tone that's set, and so hopefully it's a lovely place for comedians to play.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I remember this pub from years ago. Was it called The Social or something? Like maybe 10 or 15 years ago. I seem to remember coming here.
Possibly. It was called the Mucky Pup, and then before that it was called the Ram and Teasel.
Yeah.
But we're looking at Robin Williams right now in the bar area.
Yes, yeah. Chorlton Best Comedy Venue, award-winning venue, and there's all these photos of comedians on the wall as well, isn't there? People who've played here over the years.
Yeah, and one of the nice things, one of the things I sometimes teach courses, something I try and encourage students to do very rarely, but occasionally, is to put their own picture on the wall, and one or two have, which I find completely delightful, because there'll be, Kevin Bridges, and then an enterprising student has sort of covered up Kerry Pritchard McLean with their own face or whatever, and that makes me really happy, because this whole thing, it shouldn't be, super serious. This is a comedy venue.
Yeah, and you can see comedians just hanging out here as well. They just come and they're sitting here having a drink or writing or like hanging out before the show. So it's a really good place to kind of feel, those sort of boundaries between the audience and the comic are kind of broken, right? Aren't they? It's more of a communal thing.
Yes, yeah, that's definitely true. We do have a green room. There are occasionally, very rarely, but there are occasionally very, very established people who, for whatever reason, understandably, maybe they've not had time to be able to prepare their show, so they want to go upstairs and just work on it. Yeah. And we're quite good at kind of getting people out of a back door if they need to. But yeah, it is really nice to see comedians just hanging out after a show and before and chatting to people. It's lovely.
Yeah, definitely. Would you ever... well, I guess Angel Comedy also has the Camden Head, doesn't it? But
which is where it started, yes.
Yeah. Would you guys ever do any more venues, do you think? Or are you just going to concentrate on, like, the Bill Murray?
I think the Bill Murray takes a lot of time from everyone involved, and it's quite difficult to replicate this. So we're looking at Tommy Tiernan and Tim Key and Rose Matafeo and Hal Cruttenden and Mae Martin and Simon Amstell,
Harry Hill,
Daniel Kitson.
Exactly, yeah. There's lots of famous names. It's a who's who of comedy, isn't it, really, who've played here. And the comedians love playing here. They'll say it's one of their favourite venues. You have a gun to their head when they're saying that.
Yeah, they'll say it. They'll say it when they're here. Do you want to go upstairs or upstairs?
Oh, let's go. Yeah, let's go upstairs. I've never been upstairs, so that'll be interesting.
Of course, because you took a course here and then have performed on the stage, haven't you?
True, indeed. Well remembered, Dec. I did, and it was really, really good. I have to say. In fact, I say Dec is the man who taught me to be funny. So thank you.
You didn't need my help to be funny.
Thanks. I'll slip you a fiver for that later. I've never even seen this. So we've got the upstairs room here. Is this like the green room, or is this like an office?
Yeah, so this is the green room. At the moment it's an office, but during shows it's the green room. Yeah. So last night you can see we had the Halloween show with Julia Masley and Big O Van and Jordan Brooks and a whole bunch of people performing brilliantly, and before that Ed Knight. And yeah, so it's nice because everybody before their shows, however established and famous or not yet established and famous, sits in the same room and gets roughly the same treatment. Yeah, which is grand. And then we've got this green wall, a literal green part of the room, which was for Zoom work during the pandemic primarily. And then we've got kind of different posters from...
Some posters, Bill Murray up there, and some kind of cool cartoon type posters. Yeah. Wow, this is very exciting.
What's a picture of the Pajama Men? I'm currently working with Chanel Allen, who I think is brilliant, and we hope to have a sort of institutional memory of stuff that's happened in comedy even way before the venue opened itself.
Right.
So there are posters from shows from a long time ago.
Okay, cool.
Stuart Lee's given a couple of things. Do you want to go into the kitchen?
Let's have a look in the kitchen.
Okay.
Wow. The lesser known. Hello, guys. I think there's a meeting happening, so we won't disturb that too much.
That's Sarah and James and Liam.
Sarah, James and Liam. Thank you for having us here today, guys. I'm going down the stairs.
And then there's this part, which I'm not sure we can climb out to, but the roof.
So you've sometimes done shows when people have gone on the roof, haven't they? And then like performed to the people on the street.
Yes. Yeah. We've had various different bank holiday shows.
Yes, Aisling B did one, didn't she? And I remember her posting from up here.
Yeah, she did a food bank thing, and she also did. It happened to be the case that after the Queen passed away, we did a big one of these, and it was principally Irish acts that were performing, which is great. I don't know that many comedy venues are particularly pro-monarchy.
Perhaps not. Yeah. The staircase is reminding me of my grandma's house.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's just an observation.
What's your grandma's house like?
Well,
I can take a cue.
Sort of. It's got that, those kind of narrow stairs. Right. So we're going behind the bar now.
So we were upstairs where we saw the kitchen and we saw the green room. Up above there are a couple of rooms for people who live in the venue. So sometimes we have comedians staying performing.
So people can stay overnight or for a longer time.
Yeah, sometimes. Particularly if they're from out of a long way out.
So Dec's now taking me down into the cellar to kill me. So hopefully, when this podcast is dug up in six to 9 months, there should be enough evidence for prosecution.
And if this was your last will and testament, then
wow,
what would you leave us with?
A very good question. I need to think about that.
Thank you.
So we've got all the sort of tech gear down here, haven't we?
Yeah, look how organised it
There's
seems.
all these plastic drawers with cables and stuff. Mics. I mean, some might say that comedy seems like quite a simple thing, doesn't it? One person and a microphone, but actually, there's a lot more that goes into it, isn't there? The sound system and
yes, and I think the room really affects it. I think obviously the sound system matters, the quality of the lighting and the understanding of the people organising the lighting, and then things like the sort of technical elements of running a comedy show, where people are in the lineup and how they're introduced, all that sort of stuff. It all matters. So,
right. So you guys focus on those kind of key points to make it as good as possible.
I think so. I think we're all about making sure the audience has a really nice time and that people come and the comedians have a good time. If the comedians have a good time, generally the audience will. Yeah. And so for us, most of the people who've been here have seen enough comedy, particularly at this venue, that they sort of know instinctively what needs to happen, hopefully. Yeah.
And you're all fans as well, aren't you? So
massive.
Yeah, it's kind of that
worryingly nerdy fans of comedy.
Yeah, that comes through, doesn't it? That kind of fandom. Which is a thing that I've always been quite on some lots of boxes of crisps and drinks and things stacked up down here. Yeah, I think. Oh yeah,
this is sort of the pub bit. So this keeps everything inside here cold. So all the kegs are kept cold, basically. Particularly important for Guinness.
Oh, I see. Right. I don't think I've ever been in a pub cellar before. So
it's cool, right?
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, I think that idea of being a fan is really fascinating. Simon Pegg talks about that a lot, doesn't he? How he's kind of still a fan, even though he's famous, and you're still, that idea of being a fan of your favourite comedians or actors or whatever is really, really important, really interesting to still like have that love for it, right? Like
so much, like pretty much my favourite thing, and it's not just because I'm involved in it, is to come to the Bill Murray and watch comedy. Yeah. And at the Edinburgh Fringe, when I have the chance, I teach comedy and I direct it, and so often I'm watching it with a kind of professional eye. But my favourite times are just kind of the chance to go and watch 3 or 4 really, really good shows back to back, and then talk about them with a mate. It's just it's live comedy is the best thing in the world, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Well, on that, shall we take a walk outside and we'll go to a little park? So we've got. Exactly. Dec's going to get a jacket because it's a little bit chilly outside, and we are going to go on a little walk to a park, so we can tick off the park element. But I hope you guys have enjoyed your little audio tour of the Bill Murray. You need to come down here. And what I've noticed is the sound quality is incredible in here, which is very unlike most of my podcasts, where the sound quality is risible.
Your podcast, I really enjoyed it.
Oh, it's kind of you to say. Thank you.
It's true.
Okay, so we'll go on a walk out here, and Dec, maybe we'll talk about the 2 things that you're doing a lot at the moment. You've done stand-up before, but you're doing a lot of directing and a lot of teaching.
Yes.
What about the teaching kind of appealed to you? What made you think I'm going to teach this rabble of people how to do stand-up?
Well, I decided to try and do it as the pandemic hit because I had very limited options, and I'd always thought about doing it, and I found it really interesting.
Dec's just seen someone he knows
and waved at him.
And
I'd always wanted to do it and hadn't really had the time. Is one way of putting it. Another way of putting it is the pandemic hit and I wanted to do something I enjoyed and earn a living. And I almost instantly absolutely loved it. Like, it's the most wonderful thing is to watch a group of people who don't know each other, know that they're bonded a bit over their love of comedy or their interest in doing it, and see over a pretty short period of time how quickly they can really, really start to trust each other and find themselves on stage. And watching someone be funny on a microphone for possibly the first time and then realise they're being funny is just glorious. So I got into it because then it was the right time. I've now taught for just over 3 years, and I've been very lucky that the kind of people that look to do courses at a venue like ours are, generally speaking, really cool, really interesting people, and a lot of really, really, really great new comedians have come out of the courses. I love it.
Exactly. You've had a lot of successes, haven't you? People who've done a course have gone on to do their own shows, and some success in some cases.
We lots of people who've won various different awards. Awards aren't the be-all and end-all in comedy, but lots of people have won sort of new talent awards, and we've had people who are I've had people who are ex-MPs and star of the Barbie movie and star of sort of big Netflix shows as well, and just lovely, interesting comedians or newer acts who are thinking to themselves, how can I make this funny? And we were talking before the podcast about your own stand-up and how your stand-up is not what's the difference between men and women type stand-up. And I love different and interesting stand-up, and I partly because I see so much of it that I want something that grabs me, but also it's just so glorious when you see someone on a course and they're like, I'm going to talk about, say, brutalism, I'm going to talk about, say, X, and I'm going to find a way of making that funny, and then watching, because there are showcases at the end of the course, watching them actually make a group of people who might not have found that topic, might not even have known about that topic, but watch them properly start to get into it, and I love so much just saying, I'm not the oracle of comedy, you guys should absolutely choose the thing that you want to talk about, and then hopefully you'll find a way of making it funny. It's the best.
That's really interesting. I guess Dec did give me the confidence to think that I could talk about things like Birmingham and brutalist architecture. And there were some times when I'm on stage doing that material thinking, why did I listen to you? when there's not enough laughs coming. But we sort of talked about this a little bit, didn't we? About how a lot of people in comedy really talk about themselves, especially new stand-ups. A lot of people's first shows in Edinburgh are basically like, this is me. Like the hour is, this is my life, and these are my stories. These are my dating life, my sexuality, all these things. And I feel like a lot of it is very personal. I wonder what your feelings are about that. Do you think it's something that you would encourage people to do as a teacher, or do you think it works well?
So if you're talking about first shows, I think it sort of depends what you want from comedy. And Edinburgh, the Edinburgh Fringe, which happens in August in Edinburgh, Scotland each year, and is the biggest gathering of comedians and the biggest artistic festival in the world, is a big investment of both time and money for people. And so if what you're looking to do is as sort of in inverted commas straightforward comedy career, then you probably want a first show that says, this is who I am and this is the kind of comedy I do and this is some stuff that's interesting about me, and bang, an introduction to your world essentially. Is that what everyone should do? I really hope not. And when I direct shows, I try and encourage people to find the thing that they care about, that they find interesting, the type of comedy they want to do, and think to themselves, if they're going to be doing comedy for the next 5 to 10 years, why not start getting into the thing they want to do as quickly as they possibly can? So there's an element of very few people can spend the amount of time and money that is often needed to create an Edinburgh show without thinking, okay, and where does it go from here and what does it lead to? In which case maybe you need to create something that's kind of, this is who I am, etc. But should people do that? No, please, no. And there are other ways that don't involve spending an enormous amount of necessarily time or money. I would love more first shows to be more punky and kind of, I'm going to spend a week thinking about it and then going to perform it as often as I can. I'll get as good as I can on the fly and I'll think about who I am by the end of it, but I won't set myself kind of big targets, because then, you know, if you say this is what success looks like at somewhere like the Edinburgh Fringe, you might, it's very rarely the case that people are going to hit that.
Yeah.
And it's another way of beating yourself up. Whereas if you go up and just think, I'm going to learn, great.
Do you think you see, as a director as well, Dec, do you think you see the same kind of mistakes recurring when you're sort of doing your analysis? Dec is nodding there. When you're doing your analysis, you know, a stand-up comedian comes to you and does their set.
Yeah.
Are there things which you think you're immediately like, okay, this is the thing that you need to work on, or like here's the note? Are there those things that kind of keep on coming? Maybe you could sort of weave that into advice almost for people as well about what they should be looking to do.
Sure. Well, I'd definitely start by saying I'm not the oracle of comedy. I do regularly see comedians who come and run material to me, and then I give them feedback. I also teach a lot of courses and watch a lot, so I've got a pretty good view of what's current in comedy, and also maybe what's, I guess people would use the word hacky, or what's tropey in comedy. I think one thing that often people can do in the creation of shows is they will take, 20 or 30 minutes of material that's working in clubs, and then just try and find a way of making that into a show. I think when people are doing 5 or 10 minute sets, which are the sort of initial stages of a stand-up comedy career, you often find people assuming that what they're saying is interesting, rather than thinking, how do I make it interesting, or how do I do the work? And it feels to me that there are early stage comedians will often fall into the trap of thinking to themselves, maybe not going to see a lot of comedy, and then doing material that's about, I don't know, sex, or about their relationship or whatever, which isn't to say that material can't be great, but they might not have the experience to know if lots of other people have had that thought. And so when I teach, I talk about persona and who you are on stage, and if you have a beginning to make the choice toward a persona, then hopefully you can say to an audience, I'm this person and this is my experience of relationships. Whereas if you just say, this is my view on relationships, it's much harder to have something that feels unique or interesting, I think. What mistakes do you think you've seen people commit, early stage comedians or first show comedians? What have you seen that you've noticed?
That's a really good question. I think what we've talked about, where it's very, very me focused. I think for me, it seems like that's something that is just recurring a lot. But it seems to get laughs, and I think I'm always interested in. I'm watching the comedian and I'm watching the audience as well. And I'm thinking, what's going down well? And it's strange, isn't it? Because sometimes people will do a really great joke and it doesn't get a laugh, and sometimes people do terrible material and the audience are laughing at it. And it's hard to understand sometimes why something is working or why it's not working. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I often think about. But I think if you're not connecting, right, to me, that seems like a big problem.
Yes.
Right. I guess you have to bring the audience with you.
Yes.
Right. I remember we talked about that when I did the course with Dec, and we talked about this idea of you want to bring the audience with you. And I think when you see people who haven't brought the audience with them, then that's an issue. But I wonder if even with, Dec, you've directed pretty big comedians like Lara, Ricote and Stuart, Goldsmith and people like that. Do they still have those kind of problems? Or is it more like when you get to that stage, is it more about the intricacy of you kind of looking at the punchline, like a word in the punchline? Is it more like those finer details, or do they still have the problems that everyone has on stage?
I think I think the reason that directors and outside eyes have a job is that you can't always see. There's stuff that somebody else can see for you that you can't see yourself, and also maybe that you don't want to spend all your time critically analysing your own thing, because maybe that's not a nice way to live your life. But speaking specifically to Stuart Goldsmith, who has the Comedian's Comedian podcast, when we started to work together, we had a lot of conversations about what he felt he'd done in previous shows and what he wanted to do in this show, and maybe I was a method by which he would be held accountable to that, and kind of what he wanted from the show. He wanted to talk about the climate crisis, and he wanted to make it something that would be impactful for an audience. And he talks about this in the show, maybe in the past he's been worried about upsetting anybody in an audience, and maybe in this show, because he cares so much about the climate crisis, the idea of upsetting or offending someone when he's talking about something that matters to him and the world, objectively, he felt he could kind of let go. And so one of my roles was to sit there and remind him, you're great at this, and if two people leave because they are pro-climate crisis, then that's fine. They may not be your audience, and that's just great.
Stuart Goldsmith's a very lovely guy. I think probably quite conflict averse like me. I think we're probably
he's lovely.
Quite people pleasers. Stuart came in when we did the course. Stuart came in and did his show. I was really, really impressed by it. Went on to win best show at Leicester, Leicester Comedy Festival. I think Stuart's done a really great job there of which obviously you've helped with as well, like bringing that difficult subject matter, but then making it accessible. And I think comedy can do a great thing there, right? Where you can educate, but you can also sugar the pill. I think Stuart does that really well, doesn't he? So he's, you're learning, and he is lecturing in a way, but then he's cutting it with jokes. And I wonder if maybe when you were giving him the notes, the direction, were there times where you were saying, okay, we need another joke here, or we need to like tone down, like that kind of thing?
Yeah, so you work on structure, and you work on, if you are being pretentious, maybe you'd call it joke extension discipline, so you get a laugh on this idea.
JED.
Sure, JED, you work on JED.
Up,
Sure. You work on JED, and you see, there's a really big laugh here. Are there more laughs that can be had out of that topic? And I think that's a big thing. The difference between professional comedians and people who are just starting out is often people who are just starting out will get people to laugh at one idea, and then they'll move on. Whereas professional comedians will often wring it dry. But it was quite intimidating for me working with him, because he's lovely, but also he has arguably the most successful podcast on comedy in the UK, and knows his stuff. And so I'd be sitting there thinking, there's every possibility this idea of mine I got from your podcast about 200 episodes ago, I don't think that was the case with many of them, but I'm sure it was the case with some. But I think there's a real talent to being established and capable, and Lara Ricote and Sophie Hagen and Ellie Taylor and Angela Barnes and Andrew Hunter Murray and Alistair Beckett King and Michael Akadiri are all people that I've worked with relatively recently, and are lovely, talented human beings, but are open to how can I make this thing better, and it being a collaborative thing, which is just the nicest in the world. The nicest thing is to sit down with somebody who's got a great idea and be like, I love this, here are some thoughts, and them to make it better, and then maybe them to go away and do a bit of work for a little bit of time, and you meet up again, and then I might have my suggestions and they'll make those better. And it feels like a really it's really exciting, but it's also really really intellectually fulfilling as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. Has there ever been any occasion where there's been a flat no on all your notes? Someone said, don't tell me the person, obviously, but anyone's ever said, like, Dec, these are terrible, I'm not listening to you, and then they just gone away?
That hasn't happened, but I do use the phrase with love and kindness before delivering what sometimes can be quite strong suggestions or notes. And I did once have somebody who said, Dec, with love and kindness, I don't agree with that at all. and I think they were right. It took me a while to understand why they were right, and they, I think, intuitively understood it, and they had to sort of sit back in order to then explain it to me, and it took me a while, but they were, in retrospect, they were absolutely right. But I think that's the thing, that's the great thing. I work on it a lot, it's my profession, I love it, but I don't know everything by any stretch of the imagination.
It's subjective, isn't it? Comedy is subjective. It is a strange one. A lot of people watch Mrs. Brown's Boys Who knows why? There is that, you know, some people find things funny, some people don't find things funny. But I think it's really, I think having worked with you before, I think I can see the importance now of being more collaborative. And I think speaking personally, being a writer as I've been, it's one of those things where you just do it and it's kind of your thing. But actually, when it comes to a performing comedy, you really need to be more open to, like, it's literally a back and forth, isn't it? You know, it's a back and forth on stage, and the process is more of a back and forth.
Yes.
And I think you need to be more open to that. But I think we'll finish off in a minute, Dec. But one of the other things I wanted to ask you as well. Obviously, you've performed and you've done comedy.
Yep.
There's, I think one of the great things about you is you're now kind of helping everyone else to be great, and you know that's a special skill in itself, isn't it? Because a lot of the reason why a lot of us are here is maybe because we want attention or whatever. There is an element of that, isn't there? And
absolutely.
Yeah. So you're now sort of. You're almost like a sort of Tony Wilson of comedy in a way, like making these connections and kind of, you know,
That's a big claim.
promoting people like through the ranks. And is there secretly a little bit of you that still wants to be on stage, like doing?
I think part of me wants to be on stage every so often, if only so that when people say, when was the last time you did stand-up, I don't have to say quite a long time ago. Yeah. But also, and I say this to anyone who does the course or anyone I work with, it takes a while to get good, and at some point I will block out 3 months and work every night on stage if I can, and work up a set. But I'm now in a position where quite a few people who might also be on the lineup or might be in the audience will have taken advice from me. Yeah. And so it's a slightly more. I'm happy to fail, but failing in front of a lot of people that I have taught or have directed, I'm going to have to build up to. But no, I genuinely feel like I found the thing I want to do for the rest of my life, like direct and teach. And if I didn't ever perform again, that'd be just fine.
Did you love doing stand-up?
I always found it nerve-wracking, and I really enjoyed it, but I mostly enjoyed it before and after. And I now, with a lot of hindsight, realise that what I didn't do is what I try and help people learn to do, which is, for the first 20 gigs, in my opinion, learn a set, stay with that set pretty much, even if it's not your best set, because then you learn how to be on stage. And I think what I did quite a lot was sort of change things up too much and not give myself the chance to inhabit a persona or really nail jokes, because I was too worried about the order they were coming in or how I'd remember them. But I do think like live comedy is, and I've said this before in this conversation, it's just the best thing in the world. And so to be around it, to be helping people create it, and also maybe to occasionally say things like, I love this stuff, I love your brutalist stuff. You might be thinking, go and do things that are more immediately relatable to an audience, but please don't, you know? That I love. So yes, I found the thing I want to do and I want to keep doing it.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, we'll finish there, Dec. Let's stroll back actually. We'll go back to the Bill Murray, and maybe you can just tell us like what you've got planned for the future. I guess, are you allowed to tell us people you're working with maybe for upcoming shows?
Sure. So last year I was the dramaturg on the Sky Comedy Rep project. Which
in Birmingham.
In Birmingham, yes. Exactly. So that was 8 new playwrights creating plays, and this year I'm the dramaturg on the Victoria Wood Prize, which is a playwriting prize. If you are a listener to this podcast and you have a comedy play, then please Google the Victoria Wood playwriting prize, because it's great and there's quite a bit of money available as a prize. So I'm doing that, and I'm working quite intense. I'm at the point now of the cycle before Edinburgh where I'm meeting people for coffees to talk about their shows, and I'm helping a couple of people who are building big tour shows to North America. So those meetings are generally sitting down. I had one just before we met up, sitting down with somebody and talking through their ideas for a show. It's a really talented comedian. He's a phenomenal joke writer, and he wants to write a show about fear. And so we were talking about the kind of concepts of fear and what might go into that show, and how to maybe start to give the show heart. And maybe ideas that he might not necessarily have considered. His approach, his methodology, his practice is to read a lot around the subject. And I was saying, brilliant, but how do we engage with that? Like, are there personal stories around this, or are there kind of how do we connect to it? The thing you were talking about, how do we connect to it?
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at the moment. I haven't yet agreed to fully direct anybody for Edinburgh next year, but what I tend to do is start by having one-off sessions with people that I call outside eyes. They come, they run the show to me, or bits of the show, and talk about it, and then we work on improving it and building it. And then it tends to be quite loose at the start, and then it often turns into fully directing.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. I can't. Yeah, I'm not yet at a point where I've fully agreed to direct anyone.
Well, I'm sure there'll be lots of interested parties who'll want the Dec Munro treatment. Right, so we're walking back now to the Bill Murray. I should have said we sat in a park in Islington. I'm not sure the name of it. It's quite cold and getting dark now, isn't it? So
I feel bad that I put a coat on. I put a coat and a scarf on, and you're wandering around in a very cool hoodie.
Dec's got a coat and a scarf on. Well, yeah, I am feeling a little bit cold. I've just come from. I went swimming. I look like I've just come out of prison. I've got like this.
I disagree.
I've got this like tracksuit on.
No, you're cool.
Oh, thank you.
But what are your interests in comedy? You know, you're doing stand-up. You said just before this that you've done 25 gigs now since the course, which you took in the sort of early part of this year, 2023. What are your plans with comedy and writing?
Yeah, I still want to do stand-up, and it's something that I'd wanted to do for years. And as I was saying to you earlier, Dec, I think doing the course. Dec's not paying me for this, but like honestly, the course was brilliant, and Dec really encourages everyone, and it's given me the confidence to do stand up, because I was doing everything else. I was writing comedy, writing novels, and doing my podcast and stuff. But I think doing stand up as well is now something which has got my attention, and I've really enjoyed doing it. But also, as I was saying to Dec, you really need to do it a lot to be good. So maybe in about 15 years, I think I'll be ready. I'll be ready for like Edinburgh 2040 or something, if it's still going.
You had a great quote, I think.
What did I say? You have to be shit for years or something.
Yeah, you said basically the first couple of the thing you need to know about stand-up is you have to be shit for years.
You have to be shit.
And I was like, yes, yes, pretty much.
Yeah. But no, it was a great experience, and well, we're still outside the Bill Murray now. I haven't actually been back, annoyingly. I need to come to a show. I haven't been back since I did the course in March. I've got an incredible memory of, there was about 15 of us, and we would gather outside here. I remember the first morning I came, and there was just a group of strangers here, and I thought, what am I doing? And it was cold, and I thought, I'm going to be terrible. It was a great experience. I'm so glad I did it. I wish I'd have done it 10 years ago, to be honest. And I think that was true of a lot of the people on that course as well. I think a lot of us wished we'd had the confidence to do it earlier in life. And I think if there's anything that people maybe take from this podcast, it's that you're never too old to do it, right? I think you can keep, if you've got that dream, you've got that ability, but you've maybe not got the confidence. I think if even if we've had quite older people here as well, even if you're 50 or something, it's still worth.
Worth the oldest person, Stella, she'd be happy for me to name her. That's taken any course I taught was 78, and she was amazing, and she had so many life stories. One of the questions at the start of the course I say is, tell us a few facts about yourself, basically, and she told different facts, one of which was mind-blowing, and I don't think I could say on this podcast, but she then casually said that she'd been the PA to the Rolling Stones, and that wasn't in her facts. She was like, yeah, I did that, but I've got some other better facts.
That's great.
So if you've experienced life, you've got more to bring to your stand-up. You know, what have you got to say at age blah? What have you got to say when you're a bit older? Loads.
Yeah, that's interesting. Right, okay, Dec, thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed it. It's been a bit cold, but
I've loved it. I'm sorry you've been so cold. Thanks so much, Chris.
It's great. Yeah, thank you so much, Dec Munro. Thank you. episode of Park Date. There's lots more where that came from, and there'll be more in the future as well. If you enjoyed it, please leave a review, good or bad, make them funny. I'll be reading out the best ones, and there'll be a prize for the one that makes me laugh the most. Name check some trees in your reviews and leave them wherever you get your podcasts from. Check out our website, parkdate.co.uk, and if you see me walking around in a park, come and say hello. I think that was the sound of someone sneezing. Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye. Coming up on the next episode of Park Date, I'll be at London Zoo hanging out with some elephants, so do join me. Park Date, it's a Park Date, Park Date, it was a Park Date, Park Date, we had a Park Date, Park Date, you've been listening to Park Date. God. No.